No, it has absolutely not been a normal fire year. Previous, to this fire, our fires have been much, much smaller. That first incursion off the Cameron Peak that was 7,000 acres, that was our biggest fire until East Troublesome blew up and over the park, and now we've got about 30,000 acres in the park that have been impacted by fire. And so definitely not a normal year. We've had extreme drought conditions, so warmer and drier weather conditions in combination with a lot of beetle-killed timber. It just kind of aligns into a perfect storm for the kind of fire behavior that we're seeing, not just here, but all over the West and in Colorado for sure. The combination of both of these fires is a little over 400,000 acres, which is phenomenal. But I think that those weather conditions and those climatic conditions are going to continue for the foreseeable future, and this is really our new normal.
It was a life-changing event in terms of fire's behavior doing things that pretty much no one thought would happen. In particular, the fire jumping the Continental Divide was a huge surprise.
And so, you have this personal, professional collision almost that's happening when you have a fire that's in your park or right outside your park and your colleagues are being evacuated.
We knew that, that in talking with the incident management team, that the fire was probably 4, 5, 6 days away from coming to the park. There was some weather expected, and but the West District ranger, she was able to get the staff on that side to say, hey, it's still several days away, but let's make sure we're prepared. So she got the staff together and they made evacuation plans, and they were able to get some of the trails crew to do a lot of just kind of last minute fuels reduction around the housing area.
Needing to have sets of eyes and communication happening because things happen really quickly. Being able to have check-in procedures for your staff. Those were all really important preparation steps that we had. Our colleagues here tried to coordinate things that if our staff were evacuated because of the East Troublesome fire in park housing, they pre-set up some potential hotel lodging availability, and boy, did we have to kick that in quickly.
The Larimer County Sheriff's Department went ahead and instigated an evacuation of all of Estes Park. That was quite a feat. I don't think it had ever been done before, and because of our pre-planning, the professionalism of all of our cooperators, it was seamless. I mean, it really, to get that many people out of this town without any major incidents was unbelievable.
And because this was such an active fire season last year, we had a lot of our communication things in place. We had an employee hotline. We had, I don't know how you call it, an Everbridge or a Send Word Now system through our park dispatch to be able to notify our staff, really emphasizing to our staff that not only lived in park housing elsewhere, how they really needed to make sure that they were dialed in to their county's emergency communications system. Oddly, the whole concept of virtual meetings last year with COVID and the pandemic in some ways assisted us with the communications, because all through the last year we had weekly all-employee meetings tied to COVID and tied to our timed entry. So when the fire occurred, we just weaved all of that into our regular virtual meetings. And so in many ways, our staff felt like we were communicating better than we had in previous years when we met in person, because we were scattered to the winds during the fire. Some of our colleagues stayed here. Many of our colleagues were part of the firefighting efforts and managing that fire. And then others were spread out and had left the Estes Park community. So to be able to literally have virtual meetings with each other and as things were happening was really critical to our communications.
Well, in the case of the 2020 fires, we did order in help on resource advising, but I also played a really big role because the resource advisors have to receive information on the resources that we want to protect. What are the priorities for protection? Why are they sensitive? What are recommended protection strategies and things like that? And one of the big lessons learned from this past year is that we were not prepared with that information in a readily accessible format for resource advisors. And so we had to do it on the fly. And the park has a ton of information and expertise and GIS data on all these things, but they just need to be put together in a readily accessible package for the resource advisors on the incident.
What happens after a fire season like we had is that you have to also not only know who plays those roles, but realize that you might have to have somebody else helping, because you can kind of keep that pace up for a while. But you need to have a deep bench. So you need to be like, okay, when we don't want this person to fall over. And so you need to continue to prop each other up. And, I just am so grateful that we have such an amazing team of Rocky, that we were able to prop each other up. And we have such an amazing team with the region that assisted us so much, and that we it was like, hey, we need reinforcements. And that's what, the region did.
One really important thing to note is that even when the fire is called out, there are a lot of threats to be concerned with. Floods and debris flows are life-threatening situations. Fires are just a really big vector for exotic plant spread, and we did have some dozer line and some driving on vegetation, some hand line and water drops that can exacerbate that. So we have a lot of work to do with exotic plants. There's many miles of trails that were burned, and the wooden structures that hold the trails in place are gone or partially consumed. Those need to be replaced, or else we're going to lose the trail and the trail tread. And once that's gone, it's just even more expensive to replace that trail. There are a number of bridges, both the larger multi-use bridges that can take stock, as well as the smaller bridges that were burned. So the trail crew has a huge workload before them. The wilderness campsites, we have issues there with the wooden structures being burned, with hazard trees in some of those areas. We have to close some of those for public safety and do a lot of work restoring those areas. Hazard trees along the road, especially over on the Grand Lake side, we have work to do in that regard.
We have seen, a number of houses lost. There was an in-holding lost. And there was a 4-car port garage that had a lot of historic artifacts, wagons and things like that. That is completely gone. Never say never. Expect that with the changing climate that that we aren't in those same situations, that fires are going to start earlier, burn longer, burn hotter, be more severe, and it's just a fact of life that we need to get accustomed to and do better planning and budgeting and workforce planning to address those things.